Hello and welcome to another episode of the Construction Corner podcast. I'm Dillon. I'm your host. And before we get into announcing our special guest for today, Matt, it's been hot here in Michigan. We are in Michigan, in California. We have some rain. It's just a bunch of other crazy weather stuff. But for construction, how have your job sites been there in Michigan?
It's been miserable. We've had the first 4-day stretch in a row that we could work for, I think, about a month now. It's actually been dry this week until the other night. We got about a 20-minute storm. 20 minutes dropped 2 inches of rain, so it souped everything back up. But after this weekend, it's saying it's dry again. So construction moves on. We wait for nothing.
Yeah, if anything, you get it done while you can and get under roof as soon as possible.
Yes, it cannot come fast enough.
All right, guys. With our little weather update, I think it was what the first 2 minutes have turned into for us. Is like to introduce our special guest for today. Slater Latour is the Chief Marketing and Product Officer at Newforma. Many of you guys probably know who Newforma is. They're in project information management, basically all your document submittals, transfers, all that kind of stuff for industry. You can use AECO, but Newforma's been around for a long time. They're the OG in document management, and really to help just information management, communication, all that kind of stuff for all types of projects. Many of you have probably used it. They've been around forever. And just a great solution. And Slater's portion of this whole beast that is Newforma is marketing, product management, and development teams there at Newforma, which is all business stuff and email management, integration of apps, and productivity. Basically, a jack of all trades when it comes to product. And I think that's a big, probably wide definition of product. But Slater, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. Excited to be here.
So as we kind of talked about a little bit here before the show, what and how did you get your start? I want to say construction, but at Newforma.
Sure. Yeah. So it was I started a year ago in June. So I've been at Newforma for a little bit over a year. It's funny how things happen. It's definitely the first job I've taken where it being COVID, an entire interview process into a very relatively senior role without ever having met anyone else on the team or anyone on the teams that I was going to be expected to manage, which was in and of itself a major challenge. And so now having been there for over a year, I mean, this is my first foray into any type of exposure to the construction industry, especially at the scale that our core customer base is dealing with. Maybe had been exposed to some residential construction in the past if you're building a home, but it's a whole other beast when you're talking about some of our customers that build stadiums, that build airports. And so after a year, I think I know enough to be dangerous. And there's parallels all over the place because my background was largely in wealth management technology and financial technology, but in that industry as well, very forms driven, very documents driven, and getting exposed to that and that whole transition from actual paper forms getting faxed or mailed to you already have all this data somewhere. Why don't you just pre-populate it? It's 3 times as fast. A lot of that transformation is relevant in the work that we're doing in terms of innovation. So that's always been interesting when you come from one vertical to another and see that a lot of the same problems exist, regardless of how unrelated those two things might seem from the outset. But yeah, it's been great. I've enjoyed it a good deal.
Well, that's good to hear that we're not the only industry that's screwed up and lacking.
I didn't say it like that.
We'll say it for you.
So I guess I'll jump in. Being kind of new to the AEC world as you are, what are you enjoying about it the most? Obviously, you're on the sales and marketing side, but what are you seeing in the industry that's kind of sparked your interest?
Well, I guess, I mean, yeah, that's a multi-layered question. I'd say like one of the coolest things is coming from a software background and having it largely be abstract versus in terms of what the customers are doing, to coming in and we start meetings and we'll look at a project that one of our customers looked on, and just seeing the imagination it took, the scale, the number of years of commitment, the vast number of people that had to be involved in the variety of specialization to actually deliver an airport that can send people all over the world, millions of people every year. Like, that's cool to see that, even though what we do is such a tiny part of it, that's a really cool and interesting thing to be a part of, and something that we try at Newforma to never lose sight of. In terms of the more granular, what do we enjoy about it? It's I think there's a lot of opportunity in this space to make the workflows more efficient, to make sure that you're not running into communications problems, to making sure that everyone's working from the right versions of documents, that everyone is on the same page in terms of changes to the project that were dictated by a change in design or by a change in the conditions on the ground. I think there's a lot of opportunities to improve the synchronization, and that's something we really dived into.
It's a good answer.
Yeah, I mean, from my experience, and coming into construction, as I did, I came from electrical safety, was kind of my first job. So I got to go into all types of facilities, from steel tube plants to, grain elevators, chemical plants, the whole manufacturing base that is most all of the Midwest, and even stuff in Pennsylvania. There's a lot of manufacturing that's hidden in nooks and crannies that we just don't know about. And then going into construction, where the documents I delivered were a 60-page, 8.5 by 11 PDF, right? And then you go into construction and it's, a 100, 200 sheet set, 1,000 sheet set of a 30 by 42, right? So, 4X in scale drawing or 6X in scale drawing, thousands of pixels. And then to compress all that data and send it in drawings alone, not to mention the 2,000 page spec book that no one ever reads, along with all those drawings. It's just a lot of stuff to keep your arms around. And I think a lot of people always lose sight of how much data we generate as an industry that gets transferred. And
it can seem so mundane, right? To think about, we're literally going to take an empty space and turn it into something highly functional and beautiful. But how do we figure out, I can't email this, it's too big. And that's a major challenge in getting this, massive thing delivered where there's nothing now. It's kind of, it almost seems like that's how could that be a thing that pops up and gets in the way of this project getting done? It should be, I don't know, the ground giving out or the rain. It shouldn't be that the PDF was too big, but it is. And if people don't have the right versions of things to work from in the field, think of the cost delay in that problem.
Oh, it could be catastrophic, and it often is.
Yeah. It's been very interesting to see. The other thing that I don't think people outside of the industry appreciate is just how structured, when you're dealing, you think if you've ever had someone come work on your house and you just have the contractor wants to ask you a question, they just text you. And you don't realize that that's just not how it works if you're building something much larger than that. Every single interaction between the various specialized trades that will work on a project like that is governed by a specific contract document, and the way that those contract documents get exchanged is highly regulated and highly structured. So how do you manage all of that and do this incredibly difficult thing? of creating a large and functional physical space. It's not something that, if coming from the outside industry, you would have thought was true, or maybe I'm wrong, but I certainly didn't. I immediately realized I had a lot to learn.
No, I think you're right. It's just, and it doesn't matter if you're on smaller projects or larger ones, but just the sheer volume of paperwork that we produce just on a daily basis a lot of people probably wouldn't recognize that. There's a ton of it and a lot of waste because of it. So I think to systematize that and house it all in one location has more benefits just an organization.
Yep. And it's crazy to think that the default probably is, and still in some cases, and for the right reasons, but probably was for many years, like the amount of overnight shipping that would have to happen to get those documents from point A to point B was probably unimaginable.
Yeah. So I've been in a lot. Well, the first A&E firm that I worked for is the oldest in the actually. Their like lineage all the way like back. They were the ones that designed Churchill Down. So they're in Louisville, Kentucky. Wow. It's Lucken and Farley is their name today, but they're the oldest A&E firm that like still stands. Like they've changed their name, but it's not a merger type thing where they like went away. And in that, like they had a mail room is what they like called it, or a print room. And historically, they still had a person in charge of that, where they maintain all the plotters. They would handle shipping if we needed to, because like in some jurisdictions, until like a few years ago, Florida had to have wet seals. So that meant for all the like contract documents, you had to stamp and wet sign, or it was those hand crimpers to seal them. So you had to hand crimp every single drawing with your seal, and then wet sign every single sheet. And you had to do 5 sets of those to send to the governing agencies in Florida to get, drawings done. So that and then you had to overnight them, right? So then you had all these drawings, and they probably had to go to separate people. So you had 5 different boxes, and it took like our principal literally a day to sign all this stuff, and someone else like doing all the embossing.
And God forbid there's weather, or the delivery driver, misses the one of those people, right? Because then can things proceed? Who knows?
Yeah, and I mean that's just like and now Florida's all electronic, but the thing in that, even just a few years ago was, now think back to when all drawings were done that way, and all drawings were done by hand, which for a lot of firms was still like 99, 2000. Like it was still, a blueprint set of drawings that you had to like send somewhere to get, or if you're a separate mechanical or MEP firm or structural firm or civil firm, the architect had to send you like physical, Mylar prints for you to do your own stuff. Like a lot of this, like, we think that, technology's been here forever, but it's like really only like 30 years old.
Yeah.
So,
it takes time for adoption to replace that stuff. So, so even if the technology's there, sometimes the harder problem is getting people to change how they work, and to embrace it. Because if it works at the end of the day, it's not like it's the building, it's what the end result that actually matters. So it's, getting people to change if they've been doing something for 10, 15 years and the things have been getting created, what can you say to convince people to change? So sometimes it just takes time.
So your main client base then is obviously the architecture and engineering industry. Is that correct?
That's very correct.
Okay. Because I was going to say, changing the way construction guys do things is a lot like pulling teeth sometimes. So, I don't know if the A&E crowd is quite as bad, but I could see its challenges.
It probably varies. There's always your curve of people who are really excited about everything new, and then you've got there's the adoption curve. I think it's true of every industry. It's just kind of when that adoption curve starts.
How did you guys do during the last year and a half through COVID? How did that change?
Yeah,
your
that's a good
company
question.
operates?
So, I mean, I started the conversation by mentioning is like my first time interviewing and accepting a position without actually having met anyone in person. So, you know, a lot of that type of thing is for us internally is getting everyone comfortable with Teams instead of actual in-person meetings. And you lose some stuff with that in terms of being able to get into a room and whiteboard and really really like play things out strategically and having those conversations. So that part's been pretty tough, but you know, you just have to adapt and be resilient. And I think for the, from the customer side, it's the same. It's a little bit of the same story. Like you go from assuming that that everyone's going to be sitting at their desktop and wired in an office. Like in terms of how we deliver our product, we've realized that we need to be more flexible and have more of an assumption that it's going to be a mix going forward, a little more of a hybrid mix. So we've definitely learned a lot about how we work internally, and then have learned a lot in terms of how we want to approach the next roadmap, so to speak, for our products. So
are you still all 100% remote, or are you back in the office?
Yeah, we're now in a little bit of a hybrid. So we've got a few days a week in the office and otherwise are remote, and that's been great to actually get in and do the stuff that works so much better when you can be in the same room with someone.
Yeah, it was really reassuring. I had a meeting this morning with a prospect to talk about a new office, which frankly I thought was dead. But it seems that the whole industry, the whole nation is trying to get to kind of what you just said, a kind of a hybrid, be here for 3 or 4 days and then a day or two at home or Starbucks or wherever you do your thing.
Or in the field. I mean, for A&E especially, like, it's not like construction in that you like literally have to be there to build a building, but they need to be out in the field a good amount too, and they're going to need access to all their data. So and it's probably been hybrid for longer than people really want to admit, but it's getting to the point where people will be willing and embracing of the fact that it is all work models really are hybrid.
I guess in there, so for Newforma in particular, I know it's been years since I've used Newforma or been in a firm that needed it. So with that, like we always had to log into servers. So it's your kind of model moving forward to because we had our own, I think, on-premise server to access everything, and it was our own little silo to where now it's a kind of a cloud model where anyone anywhere can access any drawing, send anything, check a submittal, like all that stuff.
Yeah, we're definitely moving that direction. And in how we extend the product, I think there's still a need, like especially when you're talking about the value of the intellectual property that we're discussing. People are going to want to control that and own the access to it. So it's more about, for us, it's do we want to have a fully cloud product? Yes, but then we also need to have be able to provide experiences to those customers that aren't going to be comfortable with a fully SaaS-based cloud-based solution, to give them an experience that provides the best of the cloud with the security and the control of what existed when when everything was sitting on a server rack in your local office. So we're trying to find the right ways to serve both of those use cases. Both by like building mobile apps that connect to on-premise servers, building web apps that connect to our on-premise servers, collaboration tools there, and then also thinking about what does a 100% cloud-based solution look like for a different profile of customer.
Yeah, one of the things, we kind of mentioned the difference between like a home builder, right, and home services industry, right, whether plumber, electrician, builder of some sort in residential, and then on the commercial side where you have, infinitely more data to deal with, but also some of the clients that you serve in that commercial capacity. When you're dealing with like federal clients or
bingo, I was just going to go there,
or some DoD type clients, like their security requirements are far more stringent, and like a SaaS model is
and then we're a global company, so thinking about like the German market as an example, if you're doing German government work, like you better not be able to access anything related to this project unless you are sitting in the office behind multiple firewalls. Like if you even like whisper clouds, it's just not gonna work out for you. So we need to have like different ways of offering the experience that work for different profiles of customers and different geographies.
So, I mean, we've talked about data, just how much of it there is.
Yeah.
I think that, still it's hard to wrap your head around unless you're kind of in it or dealing with all this paperwork. And with that, like, what are some of like maybe the trends that you're seeing with, we've talked about a little bit of cloud or data storage, but some of the, maybe even bigger trends past the paperwork stage of construction, but like, as Newforma, and you guys are kind of, connected to a lot of different people globally, a lot of industry globally. What are some of the trends that you guys are really seeing that you could share with us?
Yeah, I think BIM is a story that it gets talked about a good deal, but I think there's a tremendous amount of runway there to continue to improve technology. I mean, even when you're thinking about actual contract documents are largely are based on 2D drawings at this point, and that's I think there's good reasons for that, but can you start to incorporate the 3D views of that stuff? We're seeing more and more adoption of VR technologies. I think that has implications for planning, for budgeting, for safety, for efficiency. So I think BIM has a long runway ahead of it, especially when combined with VR experiences that will just, I think they'll improve project outcomes. I can't say like, oh yes, that will bring down costs and improve efficiency, but I think that we'll end up with happier outcomes and less rework. So we'll see where that all goes, and then there's the concept of like digital twins, which I think is really interesting, and that is related. It's much easier to think about a project like a maintenance project or an improvement or the extension of a physical space if you could actually see behind the wall to see what you're going to be breaking if you tear that wall down. So I think that's the kind of thing that you'll see more and more of. And then if you start to combine in Internet of Things concepts, where can you actually like monitor and isolate problems within buildings if they've been delivered with some kind of sensor technology that's looped into your digital twin, that's then connected back to to your contract documents and documentation for the whole project from a purely software based software plus point of view. That's where I think there's a lot of runway. And then like on the physical side, manufacture, like more modular manufacturing is what everyone talks about, but that's not an area that I'm all that qualified to discuss. But it makes sense theoretically.
Yeah, I think you hit all the right points there. I mean, from the construction side, we're certainly seeing a rise in the use of BIM. Yeah. Where I'm at, we don't build projects of the scale of airports or things like that. But even on some of the smaller side stuff, we're seeing at least versions of BIM or portions of it come in. So I'd agree with you there. I think it's going to just help to boost efficiency.
And a question I have for you on that is as it relates to BIM, like what are the obstacles, if any, to adopting like a BIM type solution? Because if it was easy and cost efficient to work from a 3D model for you, would you do it? Is it like, I'm just like, what are the barriers to entry for you as it relates to BIM, I guess?
Well, you hit two of them already. You know, is it easy to use and is it cost effective?
Right.
And whether either of those are true, I think the industry mindset from my side of the table, from the construction side, is that no, it is not easy and it is very expensive. So if we can get past that, you know, and the third is one that, you know, let's rewind 10 minutes, in that our industry as a whole does not like changing the way we do stuff.
Sure.
So from where I'm at, I'm heavily based in pre-construction. So if we could find a BIM technology that we could afford, that the clients could afford, and it would boost efficiency, I would push it all day long. Again, a lot of the projects that I'm involved in, you know, I go back and forth whether I think the economics would balance out, frankly, to do that. But I think it's, you know, BIM technology as a whole, as it gains more popularity, it's also coming down in cost. It's reaching different price points. And I don't think you have to do full on 100% modeling to enjoy some of the benefits of BIM. Yeah,
I totally agree. And that's an area. Now we're getting a little bit maybe out there, but it's something that I think about is, if you look at what some of these, you know, multiplayer video games are able to do in terms of rendering environments and keeping them stable, and at the price point they're able to do that at, you start to wonder, you know, how much longer until you could take some of that technology. I think it's already happening. But can you start to adapt some of that technology to create, you know, maybe it's not at the level of what's, exactly. It's already happening.
Yeah, so Unity years ago partnered with Autodesk, and you can basically do exactly what you're talking about. So this kind of dates me. So back in 2014, when the Oculus Rift DK2 first came out, so when Oculus was not owned by Facebook, the firm that I work for, we got a pair of the DK2, and we had, you know, the most powerful, best desktop computer, you know, money could buy, and plugged it in. We took our Revit models, our BIM models, did a whole bunch of work to them, you know, like ran them through a bunch of processes to get them into, we used Unity at the time. So, I mean, that's the rendering engine, and then exported that from, because Unity had the like out to VR to where we could do it straight to the DK2 headset. So then you could walk through literally your building in virtual reality at, you know, a 6 foot height. So if you got somebody that was short and you put them on, they were like, wow, I feel like a tall person, you know, and in that, right, to walk through a building, but you could literally do it with an Xbox controller. And that was 7 years ago. And since then, like, it's become so much better. I haven't put on a new headset, but then like I got such bad migraines in doing it, because the frame rate wasn't high enough to like give you a true experience of what you would feel like as a human, right? Like you need hundreds, if not thousands of frames per second versus the like 50 we were getting. It was pretty like sad. So it's a little techie, but in that, like the VR portion can be here, but the whole question is it worth it?
Yeah, right. that is the I guess multi-billion-dollar question. But I mean, if you, going back to the video game analogy, if the average professional, you know, as time wears on, is more and more of the average, you know, the profile, the demographics shift, and the average person like grew up playing video games, and you put a video game like experience on that, then maybe you cross that barrier of, you know, if it's super easy to use and it's intuitive based on like, and gamified, maybe you get more adoption in BIM there. I don't know.
We may have just uncovered how to get people to start working again.
Yeah, where we found that whole VR experience valuable was not, I mean, somewhat on the design side for sure, but it was more, nobody knows what the hell they're looking at when they see a 2D set of plans. Like you cannot like picture that spatially. Like what is 12 feet by 12 feet look like, you know?
Yeah.
Like how big's the room I'm in, right?
I certainly can. I think some people can, which is crazy.
It's those few architects, right, that are just really good at that. But most owners, that's not what they do. They don't think spatially about anything. And that's like, I have a hard time doing it. You know, like I think most people like actually seeing space and like at the right dimensions, like mentally is a very hard thing. Like how big is this basketball court? Like how big is this stadium? You know, how big is this concourse? Right. But by putting it into VR, now like owner conversations become like, oh, that's what it looks like. I like that. I hate that. You know, like
exactly. I mean, it probably also reduces some Matt, I bet you deal with this is, you know, you get told what to build, you build it, then they see it and they're like, oh, I don't like it. Change out all the, I don't know, change that. And you're like, okay, now here's the cost. And then they're not happy. Like if you could just overcome that you don't know when that's going to happen, but if you just overcome that happening of being able to actually like visualize what that, I don't know, what that window looks like in a wall based on its placement, maybe that's where you're going to get your ROI, right?
It's a good point because we get that quite often. I had no idea it was going to look like that.
Yeah.
Well, it's been drawn this way for 6 months.
Right.
But yeah, you could do it with that, I think.
We acquired a company called BIM1 that has a product called BIM Track earlier this year, I guess it was, and they have a cool integration with Enscape. Are you familiar with Enscape? And what BIM Track does and specializes in is the issue tracking within the context of a BIM model, and through that partnership, like you can be doing the VR walkthrough experience, seeing all the issues, creating new issues within that 3D world. And that's, you know, again, it's I don't know how, you know, it's probably, again, it depends on the scale of what you're doing, but that's where you can start to avoid things like, oh, that, you know, I really hate that product in this space, that window, that whatever it is, and avoid some of those rework issues. And make sure those get communicated and tracked when they need it, you know, at the right point in the project, not after you've just ordered 2,000 windows with white trim, but white trim, the way clashes very badly with something else.
Yeah, and that's one of the biggest things that I've seen in talking to a lot of contractors, especially as subs, that, you know, they throw out the design model and basically redo it with all their fabrication parts and that piece. So for BIM in that context becomes, you know, now you have two entities doing the same work twice, you know, so you just doubled your cost, and it's really it's a contractual problem, frankly, within the industry and design bid build, where you're designing it and then it's out for bid, then this contractor gets it, and then they have to redo, you know, all that work, or for whatever like process they need to go through to run it through their shops and their processes that, you know, and that's where BIM can be kind of combined if everybody's under like one roof from the start, but that's not how we work.
It just doesn't seem to happen that way, unfortunately, but maybe we'll go that direction.
There's definitely been more design build, I think, contractors coming up through. In that, like, so talk about IoT a little bit. In the IoT world is, you know, obviously sensors and like building like health and air quality and things like that. What else are you guys seeing from a standpoint of maybe that would integrate back to, you know, that BIM model, that central, you know, data warehouse, if you will, moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, I think you covered it, right? It is. I mean, when I think of IoT, I think of connecting the physical world to the digital one. So it really is sensors of some kind. And then, I mean, it can create more problems then it solves too, because you can get a false read on a sensor and then open a wall, and it's like, oh, it's just the sensor. So like there's going to be some, you're going to need really durable to actually like bring this into effect. You're going to need really durable low cost sensors to want to actually like put them all over the place. In terms of other areas, I'm not sure. Maybe they come with certain products that where it makes sense, so that it's not a big deal if something's malfunctioning in a 2,000 square foot house. You could probably just find that, but based on where the water's flowing through. But if you've got a structure that's many orders of magnitude larger than that, maybe that starts to make sense if you can isolate it. And figuring out the right ways to do that. But yeah, I think the durability, and then how to power that, and then to make sure the connection stays up to date, that's where the challenges are going to be, because it's going to be hard to change those types of things out.
Yeah, and quite candidly, a lot of this is way over my head, but we have seen some pretty cool sensor-based data management with things like concrete. Where guys are implanting temperature sensors as they're pouring concrete, so
right.
You can monitor cure times and temperatures and things of that nature. But those are largely kind of one and done use. Obviously,
yeah.
They don't last too long. But to integrate that further into a living building would be pretty neat.
Yeah. Honestly, I can maybe talk about it, but actually how that all actually would work, how you would keep something like that running for 50 years. That's where I think it all starts to break down a little bit.
Sure.
Well, and I think you just nailed it, right? Like we've got some cool stuff, but nothing is built to like buildings, right, to withstand or be around for 50, 100, 500 years, right? Like some of the buildings that we have in this day and age. And so we've kind of talked about through like kind of what's next, but maybe what do you see as one of the, and we've talked about some problems, but like, what do you see as one of the like big problems, and how is Newforma, or how do you think we should as an industry go about making that, better, kind of improving it?
I think, honestly, like it's going to sound mundane. It's not as next level as some of the other concepts that we've tossed back and forth in this conversation. But like a contract document is a structured document, and it is the data within it and the document itself, like that can be transmissible across multiple systems. So like, no one should be downloading, marking up, sending to someone else. They do the same, and then having to re-upload that to another system. Like the industry, I think the ecosystem needs to embrace the fact that you can send all that stuff electronically, track it electronically, manage versions like electronically. Because I mean, think about we were saying before. The industry's buried in paperwork. Well, like every time one of those things happens, you've lost minutes, especially if you have to go back and find something in an old email. So like the way like just solve the things that are easy to solve first, and then get to the some of then figure out how to find a sensor with a battery that lasts 50 years. And the way to do that is for the ecosystem to embrace, open architecture and connectivity across their, partnerships and co-opetition as opposed to outright competition.
Co-opetition. I like that. I haven't heard that before.
Probably a little too consulting-y buzzword, but it does make sense.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'd be interested to hear from you both on your thoughts.
I mean, as far as problems in the industry, I like your take on it. You obviously have a very different mindset and background than I do. If we could come up with an easy way to manage documents that was cost effective across all spectrums, I think that's huge. in terms of what I see as biggest problem to our global industry, it's much more granular than that, and that we don't have people. We have a severe lack of people coming into the trades, whether it's AE or C, frankly, I think.
Right.
And this started long before all the COVID mess and the unemployment stuff. So that's just exacerbated the problem. How do we fix that? That's what Dillon and I try to do here every week. But outside of that,
do you think it needs a public policy response of some kind? No. It's just purely a culture shift.
I think public policy or removing some certain policies that are currently in place would help. But I think the overall arching theme is a culture shift, a mindset shift of people wanting to work again, and not necessarily physically working right now, but people actually wanting to do something with their hands, create things, or design to then create. I just think there's a global culture shift that really needs to happen and happen quickly.
Yep. Sorry, please.
So one of the big things that we hammer on is in the culture side of it is that you don't have to get your hands dirty to be in construction, right? It's this thought that construction is a dirty, if I'm wearing a suit, I've never gotten my hands dirty in my life. And that is just the farthest thing from the truth, right? I've designed millions of square feet of commercial building space, been on plenty of job sites. And ultimately at the end of the day, I'm responsible for the designs that I put together. My name is on them. Under law, I'm the one that seals them. I am responsible. And I think most people don't understand that there's a lot of place, just you come from a software background, but you're in construction, right? You're construction adjacent, but you're in the industry. And I think that a lot of people, or if you're doing VR and design, gaming, but for construction projects, Gilbane has a division of 10 people dedicated to that. There's a lot of ways that people can fit in construction that I think, you don't have to go out and be on a hot roof when it's 110, you don't have to be digging a ditch when it's 0 out, right? Those are what we think of, but the industry is so much bigger than that. And there's a spot for everybody, whether you're a project manager, a programmer, an engineer, architect, construction guy, or somebody that actually likes building things and seeing a building come to life out of the ground. So for us, that's the culture that we talk about, is that, construction is not the guy digging a ditch that you see on the side of the road, or the pavement guys blocking traffic. That's a portion of it, but that is not the industry in its entirety.
Yep, totally agree. And you could start in one area and you're going to grow and you could end up somewhere totally different. In my own career, I certainly have. So, that's it is going to be culture shift. I mean, it's interesting because two of my closest friends from college are in construction, and didn't study that, but went into it and they love it. We talk all the time, but it is interesting. It's not an obvious career path for someone that goes to a 4-year university, but it should be. So that, I think that's kind of the point you were making.
100%. There's so many hats we can wear and so many ways to get here. I mean, we don't need to get into my background too much, but I did not take a traditional path to own a construction company by any means. I mean, there's a million different paths to get to the end, and we just need to get back to accepting that as a viable option.
It's I think on some level I have a little bit of faith that the market, the demand will, over time, the demand for people and with that have the natural aptitude that can develop that skill set the economics will just adjust, and you'll see, and the culture will follow a little bit. But that can be slow.
I mean, for me, it's what I do now, is develop software to like automate, electrical design. Cause that was the problem that Matt talked about, is we couldn't find people, when you're designing like a big school, 300,000 square feet, that's an 8-month project with 2 guys on just electrical dedicated to it.
Yeah.
Like, and not to mention the other 8 projects that you have, right?
Yeah.
Like it's a lot of big work for a lot of firms, and the more tedious stuff that you can get rid of, to your point, I mean, that's what we automate is, that mundane stuff to let you get to the things that matter most, right? Like actual engineering, actual design, just like, contracts and document management is super important, but you shouldn't need to have somebody like dedicated to doing just that for their, or, the legions of people that in, history that firms have had just to deal with drawings and document management. Yeah.
I was just thinking about two things. One is another thing that I don't think people appreciate is just how specialized like getting a 300,000 square foot building is. Like, 2 people just working in electrical design for 8 months, like it's really hard. And then this is totally unrelated, and I don't know why I thought of those things at the same time, but when I was going into Walgreens to get my vaccine, like I had to fill out a form online with my name, contact information, insurance, blah, blah, blah. Then I had to go in. Then they gave me a form. I had to fill that out again. And then I had to answer questions for them to type into their form a third time. And I'm like, this was all done. None of this. Like, I've been here for 15 minutes now, and and all I've accomplished is give you the same information 3 separate times, and then they spelled my name wrong on the card.
I think the medical industry has been the worst at that for a long time.
So I mean, it's solving some of these simple things will make the experience better for everyone, but I don't know. It's like doesn't get the attention it deserves.
Yeah.
Slater, where can they find you?
Yep. So www.newforma.com if you're interested in our approach. That's pretty much it. Pretty simple.
Awesome. Slater, I appreciate you coming on today, man. It was an interesting conversation, and it's always good to get viewpoints that are around the industry, but sometimes not right in the same space that we operate in.
Yeah, I appreciate you having me on. Hopefully I didn't embarrass myself too much.
That was fun.
Yeah, Slater, thank you. Guys, I mean, we hit all the high points, right? We hit document management, how like just big this industry is, and then going from like, thinking of housing and texting somebody for answers to the process that we all know as RFIs and, all despise in our own way. But then going through, BIM, VR, IoT, modular construction, like there's a lot to this industry. And, like Matt and I hammer on every week is communicate. And again, we want people to know construction is a great industry. There's a spot for everybody in, no matter kind of what your aptitude is or what you like, there's probably a spot for you somewhere. If you like building things, if you like seeing things come out of the ground, if you like just being a part of, the amazing thing that we call like a transportation system and like infrastructure across the US or office space or schools, whatever it is, there's a spot for you. So I think that's our big message. Any last closing words, Slater?
No, I mean, I think that you said that very nicely. I think you said that very nicely. So I can't, you made it too hard for me to follow.
He's good at doing that.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Well, that's this episode of the Construction Corner podcast. Until next time.